It's part 2 of the Abridged Cherokee campaign. In the first part, we attacked Spain in Florida, taking their territory easily. Then Louisiana and the Iroquois Confederation to our west and north declared war on us. We made a sneaky move to take New Orleans from Louisiana while their army was away, which proved to be pretty easy because their troops were of inferior quality, but their main force and the main force of the Iroquois Confederation are now coming towards our northern territories, and we're preparing to defend first against the natives. You might remember I said last time that the enemy army is mostly archers, so we're going to try and use the fact that we have tons of cavalry to overcome that advantage and make sure this battle doesn't take place at range at all if possible. We can't see the enemy army because they're all hidden over here. Most of them can probably hide in the open, but as I start walking a bit closer and taking my cavalry out to the wings, some of the enemies start moving forwards towards my position. I suppose at first they couldn't see me either, and then discovered me here and thought maybe this was just a small group of troops, but really it's everything. So we're going to get this fight started in a very messy fashion. I charge forward to attack this one unit of medicine men. Medicine men, despite being tagged as an elite unit, are inferior to the generic Native American warriors, so I was hoping to get a win there. And then I kept just charging forwards with everything else and discovered the rest of the enemy army. They were all standing on top of each other, perhaps to take advantage of the small amount of hideable terrain there. Not really sure what was going on. More likely the AI was just dying. Now we're going to charge in with everything and start some nice balanced melees where both sides are just going to have the same units, and I am playing on hard difficulty, so that means the enemy will have a slight advantage there. We want to minimise the amount of time spent fighting these battles. At least we know in that blob should be all of the enemy's bowmen, so if we're fighting them in melee then we will have an advantage in those parts of the fights. Now my cavalry come around behind the enemy, we're engaging their general, going to try and take him out to lower enemy morale, because really that's the only way we can win here. We need to rout these enemies, because both sides are just going to kill each other in this very messy looking fight where you can't really tell what's going on. The few units that were isolated from the main pack are going to be hunted down by my cavalry here. It's bowmen, they don't stand a chance. There's 2 units of lancers, just chase them around. They kept trying to skirmish away, but it's going to do them no good in this case. And another unit of cav, having finished off the medicine men on our right flank, can just charge into the main blob, getting a nice charge bonus, and now just being there so that the enemy consider themselves being flank attacked to lower their morale. Soon then my units further out come in to hit the enemy from behind as well, and we complete the encirclement of the enemy's melee blob, and this is starting to have a very obvious effect on their morale. I think we killed their commander at around this point in the battle as well, so enemy units started trying to flee, and because we have them surrounded we're going to do enormous damage to enemy units that do attempt to escape. Can't really tell what's going on still, obviously, but from the flashing flags we know that we're winning, and there's currently a trail of enemies running from our encirclement. We'll need to hunt them down. You can see time freezes for a bit here. This is where the replay records your decision to pick end battle or continue. I ended up picking continue because I can't remember in Empire Total War if it auto-resolves the rest of the fight if you just end the battle right away. So just to be safe here, because I really need to get rid of this enemy army, I continue the fight so I can chase down enemy units and just really minimise the amount of stuff that leaves the field, so we don't have to worry about it for a while at least. Here's the result in the end. We pretty much wiped out the enemy force. We did lose about a third of our own force because those melees weren't all that favourable, as I mentioned, so we're not in ideal condition, but at least we're not completely wrecked by it, which was the worst case scenario there.
Yes.
Next up then will be the Louisiana army, which is just standing slightly further away. I could actually go and attack it right now, but I do have the money to replenish my army. That means if I can wait 2 turns, I'll be back at full strength and it may be easier to overcome the invasion. So because of that, I'm just going to sit in my settlement, recruit another unit, and see what the enemy do. I also wanted to try and apply some leverage to the Iroquois through diplomacy now that I've beaten their main force, or what I presume is their main force. They wouldn't accept a deal where they had to give me some territory in exchange for peace. They wouldn't even accept a trade deal, and they wouldn't even indeed accept peace. So the war is going to continue there. I really just folded on my demands as they kept rejecting them, but anyway, nothing came of it in the end. Now the Louisiana army raids some territory and then moves as if to attack our settlement, but can't quite reach it, I presume. So we are safe for 1 turn. That means we'll get that 1 extra unit I recruited, but it's not long enough by the looks of things. to get our full replenishment back because they'll be able to besiege us in a moment. I could still move out and attack them, but I thought I'll just stay inside the settlement because if they do besiege it, we'll get extra garrison units, and there's still that chance that they'll just walk off and do something else and allow us to complete our replenishment, which will make our life much easier. Although, spoilers, they essentially just took a step forward and started the siege, so we were unable to get our extra troops, but perhaps we don't need them. We do get our extra garrison units now, so we've got those to play with. So we outnumber the enemy at this point, and I even thought we could just keep the siege going. Maybe we can just wait them out and then reinforce with units recruited from the other settlement. But we only have one turn of supplies, so that means we can't do that. We are actually going to have to fight these guys. Before I looked at that, I wanted to see what the situation was back down here, where our troops are still dealing with the fact that the large amount of resistance to invasion from taking Louisiana's capital is locking them down in position. So we can't do anything with this army right now, although because the rebel army in this territory moved close enough and didn't look very big, I thought I'll quickly move out and just do an auto-resolve against them to weaken them. There was a chance it would defeat them completely, which it didn't unfortunately, so you don't get the extra public order bonus for having defeated the rebellion, absolutely, but we'll get them next time. Anyway, with that sorted out, they had to go back to their settlement and we have to come back to this siege because we need to break it right now. So the enemy have lots of guns in their army obviously, so we're just going to want to use the standard tactic of trying to get shot as little as possible, closing the distance and hoping we win the melees. I put the army in a nice big line to start things off, but I'm going to detach 3 units from our main formation to go and hide in this forest off to the flank of the enemy's position. The enemy are reforming as things start because they actually can't see most of my units because they can hide in the open. So the enemy are focusing on my cavalry, that's what they can see, and I'm going to send all of the cavalry to attack on the right flank, all units together, so that the enemy will be fixated on that, and it has the desired effect. You can see the enemy army just rotates completely to face the cavalry, putting their flank right in front of where the majority of my army is waiting. So that's exactly what we needed to happen. Now it's going to be very easy for us to avoid getting shot by the enemy. So with that set up, we start the attack. All of the forces just advance in general and start hitting enemy units. They're going to try and reform to face us here, but they can't do it quick enough to actually shoot us, so we still get the melees that we need. And against units like militia, that's going to be no problem. They did have some native auxiliaries of their own behind their army here, who caught me by surprise, since they can also hide in the open. I'm not sure which side wins. I haven't compared the stats between regular natives and auxiliary natives. I presume they're pretty similar. Along the rest of the enemy's main line, we're just going to charge as many flanks as we can, get all of these units locked down into melees that they will surely lose, and of course dodge all potential gunfire from them by approaching from the rear. And our unit that had gone to attack on the enemy's right is now behind them, so they can make a nice vector towards the back of the enemy army. Those units clearing up the auxiliaries will be able to do the same thing, and the edge of the enemy's formation, their rightmost flank, is now crumbling, so those units will be contributing to the fight as well. We'll just fold our way right up their formation. At the same time, our cavalry can be deployed to attack the enemy from the front the moment they actually turned to try and deal with our attack, so they can't avoid being flank attacked at this point in the battle. We have the enemy right where we need them to be. We'll just engage them in melee all over the place. Here you can see my cavalry making a very valiant charge into some enemy pikes. It wasn't the front at least, but still a mistake overall. And I thought surely I didn't make that mistake in the battle. Then I noticed all these random movement orders that were appearing and realised this replay was officially broken. That message on the left was that my general had died, and that didn't happen either. So because of that, I'm going to switch to the live version where you can see the true shape of things and how the enemy are just crumbling under overwhelming force. We're doing a tiny bit of a defeat in detail strategy here, where we just have loads of our own units overwhelming a couple of theirs at a time, and as we work through them we're just defeating enemies for very few losses indeed. And there you go, in the actual battle those pikes weren't engaged at all, they were just wandering around on their own, so I did manage to avoid them while we just kill everything else. The enemy's general is going to be killed somewhere out there. That's pretty handy, and the enemy's formation at this stage is just disintegrating. You can see routing units all over the place. We did still have to hunt down units like the pikes, and they had some mercenary auxiliary gunners hiding off in the corner of the map as well. But with our whole army at our disposal, that's really no trouble, so we'll just skip over that. As you can see, the enemy were in full retreat by the end of things. I'm just going to end it there. It was a heroic victory. Virtually everything went exactly as we needed it to. The enemy threw away their strengths at every possible juncture, and we actually got away with very few casualties indeed, a couple of hundred, while the enemy lost a couple of thousand and are forced to fall back in humiliation, of course. With them dead, we'll probably be thinking about going after them, but first I wanted to hunt down the survivors of the Iroquois who were a bit closer, and they were occupying one of my settlements, so we'll need to get rid of those guys before we can repair it up and get the income back from it. Get some added traits for winning that little auto-resolve as well, although we actually lost way too many troops because Empire's auto-resolve is broken when the army sizes are pretty small on one side, although not as broken as Napoleon. Anyway, we're moving on, and the rebels decided to come back for a second round with our army under Inoli, and found that they couldn't win, even though the auto-resolve still wasn't all that good for us. So down they went, and that means the rebellion now is over, and we will get the public order bonus from it, also getting some more positive traits for our officers, always handy. Louisiana have sent a couple of ships to occupy our trade port. That's pretty annoying, because we were making, at this point, most of our profit through that trade. I can send some archers to somehow kick them out back to sea, but I'll now have to repair the place before it gets any trade income from us, and they can blockade it whenever they want, the Louisianans that is. I can also recruit a ship here. I thought as a native faction I wasn't allowed to recruit any ships, but I can recruit trade ships, so maybe we'll try and do that at some point and see if we can make any use of them. Now, the public order, as I said, is going to be a bit better because of that crackdown on the rebels, so I can start looking into getting an army together here to go and attack Louisiana from the south. That will allow us to keep our army up north, looking out towards the Iroquois Confederation. The public order isn't quite good enough to move as much as I'd like out, and I can't exempt them from tax because I'm actually losing money right now due to all of the raiding that the war has brought to our land. So I'm going to have to send a slightly smaller force, but still something pretty substantial, half a stack, up north to make an attack at some point if we can. And we'll try and get things repaired so we can get our money flowing once again in the future. Need to take out the survivors from Louisiana from the last battle. They were just hanging around and didn't leave during the intern sequence for some reason, so we kill them. Another nice bad auto-resolve, but we still get some good traits from it, so that's all sorted out now. At the start of the next turn, I was delighted to see that Louisiana didn't actually bother blockading my trade port, so that's good. Next turn we'll be able to trade through it, since technically last turn it was still being repaired, and we'll make quite a lot of money from that. Meanwhile, our forces will continue their advance. I'm going to keep moving up towards Louisiana. There's no army inside, but it's got a substantial garrison, so hopefully our half-stack will be enough to deal with all that. I noticed they were cobbling the roads and thought I could actually wait for them to finish doing that, because we can't cobble our roads as a native faction. So if I had their cobbled roads, I'd get a slight economy and movement boost in that region, but it's nothing too substantial, so I think I ended up ignoring that in the end. Meanwhile, our army at home is just going to move north towards the Iroquois. We might as well attack them since they're not coming at us with another force. Go and see if we can apply some more pressure to them. At the start of the next turn, we start a siege on Upper Louisiana. They've got 3 mortar teams in there. That means it's going to be best for us if they sally against us rather than making an attack into the range of those mortars. So we'll just leave them under siege, and I can even reinforce with a couple of units of cav, because otherwise that army is mostly infantry, so now it's a bit more balanced. We'll continue moving into Iroquois territory. We can see a couple of units up there to the north, but nothing too much to worry about. Let's just go in and see what we can do. They have territory both to the west and east here, so it's slightly hard to advance into their territory safely. We're always going to be under the threat of being rear attacked wherever we go. They do have a few units nearby, we discover. Nothing too major, so we'll just wait and see what happens there. The 13 colonies are moving a couple of units up to the border with us, which is highly suspicious. We'll certainly be keeping an eye on that. But first we've got an attack from Louisiana. They sally out, which is exactly what I wanted. Let's just make the battle take place not in range of their mortars. I set up my line next to a small group of trees so I could hide a few units off to the flank, and immediately failed the objective of not being hit by the enemy mortars because I actually was in range of them. It's hard to tell because, as I said last time, they actually fire at you even if you're not in range. They just fire as close as they can, like saturation, ground denial or something. Anyway, I just fall back to get out of their range, and now I'll need to wait for the enemy army to slowly advance towards me, and I'll keep some units hidden off to the side to do something similar to what I did in the previous episode, just drawing them into an ambush. And as we can confirm there, we are now out of the enemy's range. That's good news, and it actually caused the enemy to drop their mortars and charge with 2 of the units at least, and it reminded me of my old Empire Total War series. I remember that this actually happens all the time. It's some sort of weird scripted thing the AI seems to be forced to do in certain circumstances. So now those crew will have to fight with our warriors on their own because they charged out ahead of the rest of their army, and that's not going to go especially well for them, unfortunately. Normally, in a normal campaign, you'd just shoot them before they arrive, but at least they actually get a chance in this setup to do some damage to us, but I think they only killed about 1 guy before all being defeated. Now in comes the enemy army, and curiously, it's in almost a column formation, the worst possible formation they could advance in, so that's good news. They were leading with archers, and I needed to charge forwards to engage these guys before they started shooting me, because while I said archers are terrible in the previous video, when the AI controls archers they're very good. I think it's because the buffs the enemy get from the difficulty level, for whatever reason, disproportionately affect archers and turn them from being terrible to being better than most gun units. Anyway, because of the enemy's columnar formation, they can't shoot me once the fighting starts, and all I need to do is charge into the flanks with these cavalry and lock down all of the gun units, and suddenly they're going to become pretty useless to the enemy. At the same time, I'll come in with the units that were hidden up in the trees to hit the other side of the column, and now the enemy's defeat is effectively complete. You can see units routing or wavering already as we just surround all of these guys. Most of them are still only militia troops, and as we've seen, militia just can't stand up in melee really against anything, but especially not against melee troops. So they start routing and taking enormous losses, and this is just a huge one-sided slaughter. They can't escape because we have all the cavalry on the field. The floor is just absolutely covered in bodies of the dirty colonials. This has been an absolute victory for our forces. It went much better even than I thought. The enemy losing 10 times what we lost, and strangely it still says we took loads of friendly fire according to these results. I'm not sure if it's just the results reported on the battle replays are wrong in some way. Anyway, New Spain blockades our trade there, so I'm not going to get that money I need, and that's going to cause a problem in a second. We're also attacked by the Iroquois out to the east, and they seem to have the advantage here. I thought we might as well not fight them, because I can just wait a turn and then my replenishment will be done. But we retreated in an odd direction, leaving the enemy free to actually go into our territory unmolested now. So that's a very bad setup there, another annoying retreat situation, which constantly happens in Total War as you play through it. Now, as you can see here, we're bankrupt. That's the money problem. Our lack of trade is critical right now. So we need to either take some territory or get rid of some troops. And we can actually do both at the same time by going after Upper Louisiana here. I can just auto-resolve this fight. They refused to surrender for some reason. And then we got a terrible auto-resolve and took the territory that we needed. At least the terrible auto-resolve means we're now paying fewer troops upkeep, because in Empire, it's the total amount of troops, not the amount of units you have, that determines the outgoings to troop upkeep, which is very nice, much better than in the later ones where if you have 2 guys you pay them the same as 100 guys or what have you. Anyway, Louisiana are now completely gone, so that faction is destroyed. We've won our war, and we'll have to wait a tiny bit to quell public order problems before we move out, but pretty much our western borders will be secure now. There's not much else out there. I wanted to make the best of this annoying retreat situation by actually moving west here and attacking this other Iroquois settlement that only has a small garrison, so now we can kind of take them by surprise here. I'm going to lay down a save just because I didn't trust this auto-resolve, but the result was okay in the end, so we'll just move on in, lose a few troops, gain a bit of territory, and all together that means we're no longer losing money, so we can escape from our bankruptcy, if things remain stable at least, as we go into the next turn, so that's very good news. So from here we'll need to continue gathering up forces to attack the Iroquois if we can, but I think I will come back to that next time, where we'll also be facing, by the way, the return of Spain.